Tonight on the fifth chapter, the Matt Stafford bidding war is heating up, with one report saying that about a third of NFL teams have called the Lions about trading for number 9. Is this just what the doctor ordered? The Baseball Hall of Fame did not elect any new members in 2021, including Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Curt Schilling. Did the voters make the right call? And the Pistons are a quarter of the way done with the season and have a 4-14 record. Dennis and Brian on whether things are actually going worse than expected. Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. This is the fifth chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, but people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they're spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the fifth chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. And Dennis, I know you're disappointed that your Wolverines aren't playing, but the Spartans are back tonight.
Well, I'm hoping that Michigan State can show Michigan the way. You know, Sparty's been off for 20 days or whatever else. We'll see how they're faring against Rutgers and if they hit the ground running after just getting back to practice on Monday.
Yeah, that's a long time to be off. I had a friend of mine texting me saying, hey, what do you think about this line on the Michigan State Rutgers game? I'm thinking, whoa, I'm not touching that one because they haven't played in a long time. But perhaps one of us will attack that game on Major Wager. We'll see.
Perhaps one of us does have something down on that game already.
And I'm sure that a lot of you guys out there have something down on the Pistons-Lakers game because of that huge promo that FanDuel was running, where for every 313 people that bet on the Pistons to cover, they would shift the line one in favor of the Pistons. It started out at plus 9.5, and last time I checked a couple hours ago, it was plus like 115. So the Pistons would have to have an all-time record worst performance in league history by a landslide to not cover that one. Basically free money.
Yeah, that does sound like free money. Now, if it was the minus 40 or something, I would still be a little nervous.
Yes.
Although the Unibrow's not playing, so.
No, he is not. So
minus 30, I still might be biting my nails.
Yeah. Well, plus 30, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Minus 30, I would really be biting my nails.
yeah, minus 30, don't take it. All right, we're ready for episode 74. 5 more fantastic chapters. Thank you to all who are watching via YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch, and to those who are listening to the podcast via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your feedback via Facebook and via YouTube. Dennis will be reading it throughout the course of today's show. And if you're wondering what we're going to be discussing, let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, we've got a couple of mock drafts out, and they are suggesting the Lions take a couple of different players. We'll tell you who they have the Lions playing and or taking, and who doesn't have the Lions taking a quarterback at all in the first round. In the third chapter, the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame inducted 0 new players. So what does that mean? And was one player truly left off because his political views are just too extreme?
Yes.
Okay. In the fourth chapter, we are a quarter of the way through the Pistons season, not including tonight's game. They're 4-14. We'll tell you about the best and worst part about the first 18 games of the season. And then in the fifth chapter, of course, it is the Major Wager. And I'll show you this a couple of times throughout the course of today's show. But as you can see there on the right side, there's a way for you to get some free bets from DraftKings Sportsbook. If you have not already signed up for DraftKings, look right there on the right side of the screen. All you have to do is type in that link right there. And if you missed it, we'll put it up later. You can pause and look at it later on, maybe tomorrow. You type in that link to download the app, then you register, and then depending on how much you deposit will depend on how much money you can get in free betting money. It's like your own stimulus package. How about that?
Yeah, I'm ready to get in. I haven't registered yet, so I need to do it.
Oh, yeah, you might as well get some of that free money. But Dennis, first, let's start off with the first chapter. And that takes us to the Matt Stafford sweepstakes. We know that over the weekend, reports surfaced that Matt Stafford and the Lions agreed to part ways with each other. And the Detroit Free Press reported that it was Stafford who first approached the Lions. And then they agreed to his request/demand, whatever you want to call it. Now we have to play the waiting game, and we have to play the rumor mill game. So,
Two of my favorite games, by the way.
yeah, well, if you're in sports talk radio or you're in YouTube like we are, you're into podcasts, you love waiting games and rumor games. Always fun for us and for the viewers and listeners out there. Now, odds are he's not going to be traded before next weekend's Super Bowl, but he'll probably get traded before March because that's the beginning of the new league year. Is he going to get traded before Deshaun Watson of the Texans? Who knows? What will the compensation be? Who knows? We've discussed that a lot on the show. One thing we don't know for certain, or at least didn't know for certain until yesterday, was what the level of interest for Matt Stafford was. And it seems pretty high based on this report from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network.
Meanwhile, a couple other big-time really been big. But his contract is tradable. Obviously, we will be keeping our eye on that one. Meanwhile, a couple other big-time quarterbacks who also could be traded. One, Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. And this is something, remember, this came up over the weekend in a report from colleague Tom Pelissero that the two sides are parting ways. The Lions, of course, immediately began fielding calls from teams interested. From what I understand, about a third of the league, almost a third of the league, has called the Lions significant interest in Matthew Stafford. Should be able to get at least a first-rounder there for wherever he goes. And then just a curious case of...
So that certainly suggests that maybe Dennis is on to something when he's been talking all this time about a first-round pick. But the big story there, I think, perhaps even bigger than the compensation, is that a third of the league says that they've contacted the Lions about Stafford, at least according to that report. Dennis, what do you think about this report that a third of the league has called the Lions about Stafford?
Yeah, well, just because you call doesn't mean you have a great interest. It certainly doesn't mean that you're going to be ready to step up to the plate and make the deal. I also saw, was it Pro Football Talk? Was it yesterday or the day before? Making like, nah, it was a plant by the Lions. There isn't all that much of a market for them, which sounded like a plant to me. So I think you got a lot of that going on. Who really knows what the market is? But, if you're a Lions fan and you just look at just how much the quarterback market is in flux right now, from Deshaun Watson to Aaron Rodgers to more than half of the teams, could really be switching quarterbacks, making moves. Look like Ben Roethlisberger. He had his Rooney came out and talked about less money, and Roethlisberger made it sound like, he was, good with, whatever they wanted to pay him. So maybe he's staying around. But, man, every situation out there, almost every situation, you can see a different quarterback playing there. And if you're the Lions, you only need two teams. If you got the Colts, sitting there saying, you know what, we got that pick there at 21, or give you a second rounder, around what the Lions are going to be asking for, maybe some contingencies on that second rounder where it can be bumped up to a first rounder, like a conditional pick if like the Colts made the AFC Championship game. But you got San Francisco out there, and I believe San Francisco is interested. You just need that little bidding war, which everybody talks about, which is fun. They keep sweetening the pot, and then you can start demanding things like pick swaps and more conditional picks and picks in the future, and that's what you're hoping for if you're the Lions. So I believe there's a lot of false information when it comes down to this and the quarterback market, whatever it is, and teams. I think the one part, and I was going to tell myself no bashing the Lions today, but part of if you're another team out there, and just like when we talked about Stafford, like however you rate him, the other teams in the NFL, I'm sure will look at the Lions and say, you know what, it's the Lions. Like the Lions have been the doormat in the NFL. Let's use that against them. These guys don't know what they're doing. Like, the Fords are a bunch of jokers, and they got Rod Wood, who is an accountant. So maybe this is a spot that he would be good in. But I don't know about that. But the part where there's a lot of different stuff flying around. I think there's stuff flying. I think the Lions have planted things, and I think other teams are planting things. That was a long answer.
Well, it's the dead of winter, so there's not going to be much planting of gardens or anything like that. All you're going to have is planted stories, and that certainly, like I said, makes things interesting for us. But I think that this story about a third of the league showing interest in Matt Stafford is great news for the team, because I think you're right that just because you call the Lions and say, hey, this is such and such from such and such team that has a pretty established quarterback, just calling to see what the market is for Stafford, that doesn't mean that you are going to be at the front of the line saying we're going to give 2 first-round picks and some third-round picks to get Stafford. You might just be calling to see what the market is. For instance, you could look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, where that obviously Roethlisberger is talking about trying to decide whether he wants to come back or not, and maybe the Steelers are trying to decide whether or not they want to bring him back. And if the asking price for the Lions is low enough, then they'll just trade for Matt Stafford, and then maybe moments before the trade goes down, they'll tell Ben Roethlisberger, hey, we're trading for Stafford. Would you like us to cut you, or would you like to retire as a Steeler without having to go down, on a sour note? So I think that is a possibility. But when you just look at this from a math standpoint, you got 31 other teams in the NFL. If a third of them were calling, then you're talking about 10 or 11 teams. He said about, so if you want to be conservative, that means at least 9 teams have called the Lions. If 4 teams are doing what you were saying and just doing due diligence, then I think that number is probably going to be higher than 2. It could be 4 or 5 teams that are seriously interested in trading for the line or trading for Matt Stafford. If one of those teams acquires Deshaun Watson before Stafford goes, then you still got 3 or 4 teams that could be bidding on Matt Stafford. So I think that this is a best case scenario, a good case scenario for the Detroit Lions to have multiple teams bidding on him. And when you consider that the teams that are likely to be bidding on him are not going to be drafting high enough to select one of the top 3 and perhaps not one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the draft, then there could be some desperation from these contending teams like Washington, like the LA Rams, like the Colts, like perhaps even the Saints and the Steelers to get either Watson or the cheaper priced Matt Stafford.
Yeah, things that are jumping out when you look at the highest pick there. I know you mentioned the Washington football team at 19, but San Francisco has pick 12, and even Carolina, who could want to move on from Teddy Bridgewater, they're sitting there 1 pick after the Lions at 8. Would that be enough? I just want to throw that to you out of hand. Would that be enough? You just say, hey, number 8, Stafford straight up. You can come up, take Trey Lance, and you could take Micah Parsons, or Fields and Parsons, if you came away without the Lions. Would you like that?
Yeah, I would like that. I'm just thinking from a Matt Stafford standpoint, would this make sense? Because you're leaving the Lions because you don't want to be part of a rebuild, and you look at the Carolina Panthers, while they've got an intriguing Pro Bowl running back in Christian McCaffrey, and they've got a second-year head coach who's coming off of a losing record, so that's a rebuild there. If I'm Stafford and I'm demanding or requesting a trade, I'm looking at Washington, the Rams, the Colts, the Steelers, some of these other teams is a lot more appealing than a team that is right one spot below the Lions in terms of draft order.
Well, it's really whether you're deeming yourself in a rebuild or not. Carolina's been adamant that it's just like Denver. I mean, are they in a rebuild? Because they're saying they're not. Carolina's saying we're not in a rebuild. They're trying to win something. Meanwhile, you mentioned the football team, and I know the East. You could say, the East sucks. I want to play for the football team. You could win that in a down East. I mean, that stuff changes every year. I mean, the Washington football team could be one of the bottom 5 teams in the league, looking at that roster there. But that's I think
they're
Carolina. It's Stafford. It's not like, is he going to put up a stop sign if you get the best deal? Is Stafford putting up a stop sign? He doesn't have a no trade clause.
They don't. But Matt Stafford is asking for a trade out of Detroit, so he's not happy. Partially, you have to assume because they've been losing and he wants to start winning and he doesn't want to go through a rebuild. So why would he want to go to a place where he's going to be losing from the get-go? And oftentimes when you have guys demanding a trade, the teams aren't just going to say, well, we're going to ship you out, especially with Stafford having been a loyal soldier for 12 years. They're going to work with his representatives work with his agent to find a destination that works for all three parties: the Lions, the new destination, and Stafford.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. But if you're Carolina and you're Matt Rule, you call the Lions or you get a hold of Stafford and you say, look, we know what our record is, but like you mentioned, McCaffrey was out most of the year, and you sell yourself. We really think that we can be a playoff team. We think you can lead us to the Super Bowl. So it doesn't take that long, to talk yourself in and to talk to Matt Stafford and sell him on it. We've seen that plenty of times, man. Well, we're going from the basement. We're going all the way to the top.
Well, here's the other thing. Hey, Matt Stafford, this is Matt Rule calling, all right? I just wanted to let you know that you should come to Carolina, where you could be in the same division as the NFC champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the same division as the defending number 2 seed New Orleans Saints. How does that make you sound? And the same division as former MVP Matt Ryan. You want to come here so you can compete for the number 3 spot in the NFC South, just like you did for the last 12 years with the same old Lions? Does that sound good to you?
Yes, let's do it, man. I'll see you there. I'll be on the next flight to Charlotte.
Yeah, okay.
Talk to you soon, Matt. And you know what? F Matt Ryan. He's my boy and everything, but he's on the downside of his career.
No, that conversation goes like this. Hey, Stafford, this is Matt Rule. Click.
Well, you know what? I think that you got to sell yourself if you're one of those teams. And, sure, Stafford, I'm sure he does want to go to the best situation where he thinks he can win, where he just has to walk in and be number 9, and next thing you know, he's going to win the Super Bowl. It might not be that easy for him.
The Lions love Matt Stafford. They're not going to trade him to the Detroit Lions of the NFC South or the Detroit Lions of some other division. They're going to trade him to a place that he's going to be happy, because they don't want him to leave like Calvin and Barry and be disappointed or angry with the Lions on his way out. They want him to go somewhere else, perhaps win a Super Bowl, at least win some playoff games, and then come back and be in their Ring of Honor in the year 2030. That's what they want.
Well, what they want and who has the best offer. And again, you get a team that, there's only one Detroit Lions in the NFL, and these other teams can, put themselves. If you're Carolina, you say, look, man, we were just a couple of years ago, we went to the Super Bowl. We were the favorites in the Super Bowl. We were going to win the Super Bowl. We didn't win the Super Bowl because Cam was selfish and wouldn't jump on the football in a one-score game in the fourth quarter, even though he was the MVP. But you know what? We can be right back in there. And again, man, we got the best running back in the league. We had pretty good defense in Rule. Hey, we drafted all defense last year. Now we're drafting offense.
That's true, but it's a heck of a lot more. It's a heck of a lot easier to sell, hey, we've got a ready-made team, and like these other teams are going to be adding via the draft and whatnot. One other thing that I think is important for assessing the trade market that I think will help the Lions is that when you look at the market, there isn't a lot to go after in terms of free agents. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick might be the top quarterback that you could acquire via free agency, and he's not a guy who can go for 16 straight games. He's a guy that can give you Fitz magic for a month or so, but I mean, other than that, nobody wants to take a shot at Kaepernick because he takes a knee and hasn't played in 3 years. So it's either draft a quarterback really high or trade up to draft a quarterback really high. None of these teams have those high draft picks. Or you're going to have to trade for an established veteran like Matt Stafford or Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and we'll get into with some of the scenarios here in the bridge quarterbacks, but there's one. If you take there's 2 quarterbacks, but one in particular that really looks like you start thinking about he'll be suited for Detroit, and that's Anthony Lynn. He was the head coach of the Chargers, and 2 times he had Tyrod Taylor as his starter. And Tyrod Taylor is like a great bridge quarterback, and his former head coach is now the offensive coordinator with the Lions. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to see Tyrod Taylor, or sometimes he calls himself not Tyrod, Tyrod or Tyrod, whichever it is. I think that a high percentage that, especially if the Lions end up getting a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields, guys that are dual threat quarterbacks, I really think that it's going to be Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett.
Do you think Tyrod Taylor would want to come to Detroit after they have already drafted Trey Lance or Justin Fields, knowing that last year he started for, 1 or 2 games, and then the new quarterback came in, he would either be in position to not start any games in 2021 or have the same thing that happened in 2020 happen in 2021, where he played a couple of games and was gone.
Look, like everybody wants to be the superstar and everybody wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but you got to take what you can get. You think somebody's sitting out there thinking that Tyrod Taylor is going to be their starting quarterback and that's going to take him like from day one? They're just going to hand him the keys? I don't see any team doing that. What you could say to him, especially if it's Trey Lance, like you say, look, Trey Lance only played 1 game last year. We might play you the whole year.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a fair point.
We need you to be his mentor, his bridge. And maybe after 2 games, if he sucks, people will be booing and calling for Trey Lance. I know they'll be doing that here, but that doesn't mean that you can't stick to the plan. Dan Campbell talking about, well, you know what, you get out there and chew
bite a kneecap,
bite the football. Don't bite off more. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and we'll keep you out there. He protects the football. That's one thing that he does. So.
Yeah. All right. What kind of feedback are we getting?
We are getting some feedback. I'm looking here at the live chat first. Good to have Brian Jelinek back, the intern who took a day off for a wedding. We'll have to ask him about that. Congratulations, Brian.
Yes. How's Mrs. Jelinek?
Yeah. Well, what happened? What was a COVID wedding like? We'll have to find out about that. All right. Sideshow Raj. Good to see him jumping in right out of the gate here. He says if Zach Wilson and Justin Fields are off the board at 7, what do you guys think the Lions should do? I'll let you take a swing at that, chap. First, go ahead.
If Zach Wilson and Fields are off the board,
yeah, let's say the Jets take Fields and the Falcons at 4 take Wilson.
Yeah, there's that possibility. Well, then there's a couple of different ways you could go about this. And I think first of all you should go for the best player available who's not an offensive lineman, because offensive line is one of the few areas of the team where you don't really need any help. Then you have to look at what happens with the 3 free agent wide receivers. If you don't franchise Kenny Golladay and you lose Amendola and Marvin Jones, then it absolutely makes sense to consider Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith, assuming they're both there, or assuming one is there. If you just have Kenny Golladay that returns, but the other 2 leave, because you have to imagine that veterans like Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola don't want to spend their twilight years in a rebuild, then you still might want to consider taking a wide receiver to go along with Kenny Golladay, depending on who you decide to pick up via free agency. Otherwise, it makes sense to look at a linebacker like Micah Parsons. One thing that, and obviously I don't want to see that, despite seeing this shirt I have right here, it says Penn State alumni, just because I don't want the Lions to ruin his career. I think you're talking yourself into handing the keys over to Tyrod Taylor. I'm not handing the keys over to Tyrod. I mean, they're going to need somebody to play quarterback. I would say just whoever you draft should start at quarterback if you draft somebody in the first round. But the other thing the Lions really need is a lot of help along that defensive line. And what sucks for the Lions, at least according to the mock draft boards right now, is that there isn't a defensive end worth taking in the top 10, and there doesn't seem to be more than 1, maybe 2 defensive tackles worth drafting in the first round at all.
Yeah, Kwity Paye's, I think, the top defensive end there. I think you're on to it. Like, it all comes down to their evaluation of Trey Lance. Like, Trey Lance, before the pandemic, heading into the season last year, people were talking about that he was the best quarterback in this class, not named Trevor Lawrence. So there was a lot of that kind of talk. But then he only played 1 game, and, that is going to find your way to, people be down on you a little bit. Certainly not just getting the hype or just not the film or anything else. But I would put my money on the Lions, even though he would be the 4th quarterback there. The Lions take Trey Lance, and, you can make a case. You're sitting there, take a shot, Trey Lance. If he sucks next year and you're sitting there, you're going after the top guy on the board, who's that Sam Howell from North Carolina, who's pegged to be, the number 1 pick next year. So you'd be in the driver's seat there. I would guess that that's what they would do, take Lance, unless they really are down on him. Then they're going to take somebody like Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase. Right?
Yeah,
can
that's
do
a
that.
possibility. Yep.
All right, let's look at some more. Jelinek is not talking about wedding scenarios. He's talking about Jameis Winston. He says he's all in on Jameis for the year as a placeholder and bringing in Mac Jones if Wilson and Fields aren't available. I don't trust Trey Lance from NDSU at all.
Well, I think Jameis Winston is another guy that has stopgap written all over him. He has the big play potential, and that's for both sides. He can create a big play for you, and he can create a big play for the defense. He can throw a touchdown, and that touchdown might not be to your team. So if you're looking for a guy who can play the quarterback position and you have sufficiently locked up every single seafood shop in Metro Detroit, then I think that you could feel comfortable going with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, here's Paul W. You want to guess what he's talking about?
Is he talking about his radio show? Is that Paul W. Smith?
I don't. You know what? I don't know if it's. No, I think he's got a Polish last name, but maybe he switched it up to be a radio name Smith. You can do that a lot of the times. No, he's talking about college hockey and Twitch, which he always talks about. He says college hockey for the win. As I joke, is Twitch dead to you guys? LOL. You know what? Maybe Paul, we can find something where you run Twitch and talk college hockey for us.
No, Twitch isn't dead. We're running on Twitch right now.
Yeah, Twitch is there. Twitch is alive, and I make that offer to you. You can be college hockey and run Twitch for the 5th chapter. Let's do it. All right, let's see here. MSU down 26-20 to Rutgers at the half, and that's music to somebody's ears. I can tell you that, Jelinek. Nice job. Now we go to Facebook, which I have my phone kind of sitting in here where I can just see us, but not the feedback. So I got to get in here and look. And Paul is on there. You got other people watching. People, you can comment on Facebook. A lot of people pop in there and watch, but they don't put the feedback as frequently as people do on YouTube. And as you know, Chapman, we do read all of them, but we hammer away on the YouTube. We'll do it. We will read your feedback right there on Facebook as well. So feel free to do that, and Twitch as well. All right, there's your feedback on chapter 1.
All right, now let's turn the page to the 2nd chapter.
Yeah, that sounded weird. Chapter 1, chapter 2. Yeah, it's the 2nd chapter, and we continue on with the Lions, and it's this looks good when you write it out. Mock draft SZN. It's mock draft season. It's Lions mock draft season, and I've seen mocks. I've seen a lot of them so far. I've seen the Lions get mocked Justin Fields. I've seen Trey Lance mocks at 7, and you are looking at mocks as well, Chapman, and you saw an interesting one.
Yeah, this is one actually from CBSSports.com, and let's see if we can share it with you. And it had not just players that were taken 1 from 32, but it also had a fascinating trade scenario for actually 2 teams. One of them being the Texans and another being the Detroit Lions. And I'll put the article up on the screen so that you guys can see it. But here's the gist of it. It says, from the sound of it, Matthew Stafford will be joining Deshaun Watson as talented, accomplished quarterbacks set to play on a new team in 2021. In this mock draft, the Washington football team sends the number 19 overall pick to the Lions to secure Stafford's services. Washington's new GM, Martin Mayhew, picked Stafford number 1 overall in 2019 while he was the GM in Detroit. And then here's the key. To play this mock scenario out further, I have the Lions signing Ryan Fitzpatrick in free agency as a stopgap while they begin their rebuilding process. Oh, and I have the Jets trading for Deshaun Watson, just like in my last mock draft. So as we take a look at what he has in this mock draft, he's got Trevor Lawrence going number 1. Number 2 is Zach Wilson, once again going to the Texans. 3, you got Devontae Smith to the Dolphins. 4, Patrick Surtain II to the Falcons. 5, Penei Sewell, the offensive lineman for Oregon, going to the Bengals. 6, No Justin Fields for the Lions because he goes to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ah.
Now, you want to talk about who's going to have a fit over that? Carson Wentz, one of the worst teammates in the NFL, is not going to be happy about having a three-way competition. Who do the Lions pick at number 7? Jamar Chase, the wide receiver from LSU, going with Chase over Trey Lance, who goes 8, Kwity Paye, who goes 9, Rashawn Slater, who goes 10, Jalen Waddle, who goes 11. Where the heck is Micah Parsons? Nobody wants Mike. Oh, he goes to the NFC North, to the Minnesota Vikings at 14. And who do the Lions select at number 17? I'm sorry, not number 17, number 19. They select Zaven Collins, the Tulsa linebacker.
Oh.
So, Dennis?
Yeah, I haven't looked at much film on Zaven Collins, so I can't really give you a good breakdown on him. Like, sometimes those guys are the best players there. If they do that, they'll get ridiculed, and we'll see if he ends up being a great player. Out of all of that, if it ended up playing out like that, I would move to Philadelphia and offer my services for free to work for Sports Talk Radio in Philly because, man, that would be lit, having Hurts and Wentz and then bringing in Fields every day, man. It's like, let's go. What's going on here with Philadelphia? It's pretty awesome. Good morning, Philadelphia. Great to be with you here. Yeah, we're talking about the Eagles process, not the Sixers process.
Yeah.
Just keep drafting quarterbacks every round. We'll just see how it goes. And you know what? Hey, Hurts, he's pretty good. He can play running back, and if Fields doesn't work out at QB, you can probably put him at running back or wide receiver too. He looks pretty athletic. So, yeah, that would be crazy. If the Lions, if Fields and Wilson go before 7, and the more we talk about it, the more it feels like that's going to happen. Like, I think the Lions would take Wilson and would take Fields in a New York second, but it feels like both of those guys are going to be gone, whether it's to the Jets or like that trade for Watson. He ends up with the Texans, and the Falcons, I think, are going to jump in there and take a quarterback. It's going to leave the Lions high and dry. Really coming down, feels like they have to evaluate Trey Lance and feel like is he worthy of the number 7 pick right there. I'm having a hard time seeing the Lions not take a quarterback at 7. Like they are punting the season. We realize that, retooling. But are you selling Lion fans if you come out of the draft with Jamar Chase and some linebacker from Tulsa and Tyrod Taylor as your QB, man? That sounds like 2-14. Last year was 2-14, but this is the year for New Orleans. You're too young for that line that was busted out in the early 80s, but that was Spider-Man saying, Spider-Man Allen, the Super Bowl was going to be played in New Orleans. We said last year 2-14, but this is the year for New Orleans.
Yeah, no, I am too young for that. But I think that if it's a rebuilding year, Lions fans, while they should not get caught up in the year 1 record. It's about development. So it's more important what they do in 2022 and 2023 than if they go 2-14. Now, if they somehow go 10-6, then all of a sudden that's eye-opening. But if they go 2-14 as opposed to 5-11 or 6-10, not that big a deal. Now, when it comes to not drafting a quarterback at number 7, I could see that. I think that is a possibility. I don't think that they have to take one. If they have another pick at number 19, there's a possibility there. And let's not forget they have a high second-round pick as well. You got Brad Holmes, who's supposed to be some expert at writing all these evaluations for college players. Well, maybe you see what he thinks about these second-round pick possibilities as a quarterback. The way I look at this, at first with regards to that CBS Sports scenario, drafting a wide receiver at number 7 and then drafting the next Jelani Tavai at number 19.
Poor man's Giovanni Tavai.
Well, here, let me show you something else from the CBS Sports mock draft that it's not going to make Lions fans excited about Zaven Collins. It's pick number 19, prospect rank 37. So you're reaching for 18 picks, according to CBS Sports, for a linebacker. Obviously, linebacker is a need, And if the Lions drafted a linebacker high in the second round with their pick, I don't think Lions fans would be disappointed about that. But if you're going to draft Zaven Collins, it makes sense to wait until the second round to get that guy, as opposed to fans saying, oh, this is the next Jelani Tavai, which I guarantee you fans would do.
I like you ripping on the Lions in mock drafts. That's a fun thing to do. Like, this front office is a joke if they do that. Yeah, they're mock drafts. I get it. I like it. You know, this is really going to test Detroit Lion fans' patience because they're loving the off season. They got a high pick. They're excited. Even if they don't like Stafford, that moving on, they have to come to the realization, somebody new here, they could be great. So that's tantalizing. But if they get to 7 and don't get a quarterback, and then they take a wide receiver, man, to be a Lion fan, and if you're old enough to remember the Millen and the Rodgers and the big Mike Williams and watch them draft a wide receiver when they need a quarterback, man, it's like that's going to be something for Lion fans. And then, as much as you are totally prepared for next year, the Lions going 2-14 because it's a retool and that's going to be great because they'll probably get a top 3 pick next year. The majority of Lion fans, I don't think they're ready for any 2-14, even if they know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially when you think about how a lot of Lions fans are excited about the staff that was assembled. I mean, they bring in Anthony Lynn, a former head coach who had a winning record, but when you're black, that's not good enough. And he is the offensive coordinator. You bring in the Saints secondary coach to become your defensive coordinator. You got the kneecap nibbler, and a lot of Lions fans are going to say, hey, if this is a good coaching staff, then they should fare better than 2-14. And especially if they've got these Rams executives, not just the former college director, but the former pro scouting director, evaluating all this talent that they could bring in. I think it makes sense for the Lions fans to say, hey, we should be better than 2-14. But the quarterback position is a significant one, and if they don't draft one at 7 and they don't trade up for one late in the first round, then it doesn't make sense to sit there and say, hey, we need to be a contender. We need to be contending for 500 right from the get-go. The one thing I will say is you mentioned they have to evaluate Trey Lance. I think that's a foregone conclusion. They have to evaluate Trey Lance because there's a lot of people who think that he might be better than Wilson and better than Fields. I don't think that he's better than Fields because I think that Fields is closer to Trevor Lawrence than he is to any other quarterback in this draft class. Because of that, I would continue to keep my eyes laser focused on Justin Fields. And if you trade Stafford before the draft, which is highly likely, then you're going to have extra pieces, and you can use those pieces to either A, fill a lot of the holes that you have, or to B, trade up. If you trade with the Colts, for example, and you get the number 21 pick and a 4th round pick, you could use that 21 pick to move up from number 7 to maybe number 3, where the Dolphins don't need a quarterback. Could you trade up to number 2? I don't know. But you have the ability with 2 first-round picks or whatever you get in the Stafford deal to move up from number 7. And if you're going to do that, get Justin Fields.
Yeah, well, first of all, Lions better get more than number 21 and a 4th-round pick for the Colts. But I know you're just putting out a hypothetical out there. I think Lions' minds and hearts are set at 7 on Fields or Wilson, and if it's somebody else like Lance, they're going to be disappointed in that. Of course, if it's not a quarterback, they're really going to be disappointed. But you just start thinking, if it was Zach Wilson, you start thinking about who they could pair him up with as the placeholder or the bridge quarterback. And Zach Wilson, I think that's when you do get some Fitz magic coming in. If Ryan Fitzpatrick and Zach Wilson, that looks like a nice combination for the Lions. If it ends up being Justin Fields, I do think that Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett, both of those guys are low risk type QBs. And they don't throw a lot of picks. More of check down guys and guys that will know the situation if they're coming in here. Maybe they get a whole year, but I think if it's Fields or Lance, I think Tyrod Taylor, because of the familiarity there with his offensive coordinator with Lynn, makes all the sense in the world. And Brissett, when you start looking out there, maybe Trubisky, another guy that's as a dual threat guy, and one of those quarterbacks. Like if you got Trubisky, I'm not saying that you're looking for him for the future, and maybe the Bears end up keeping him around anyways.
They will.
But if you get Trubisky, it's one of those guys that you can bring in. You're hoping it's like a Tannehill situation. Didn't work out in one spot. You're placing him here. You're competing with the rookie quarterback. You're not really thinking about keeping him on, but maybe he hits, and you could get something like that. But those are some of the combinations that I was coming up with.
Well, here's what I think is certain. If you're a Lions fan out there, if you're getting a bridge quarterback to start, whether it is Brissett or it's Tyrod Taylor or it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, that is a downgrade for Matt Stafford, and there's no reason to get angry when the team loses next year. It's going to be an SOL, same old Lions season. Now, it's probably going to be that way even if they draft Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or Trey Lance. But if they're drafting, or if they're starting one of these stopgap quarterbacks who can't make it as a starter anywhere, and that's been the case for years, when the offense stinks and they're having trouble doing anything but having 3 and outs, this is what you expect. You can get angry and say, start the rookie, put him in there, let's see what you got, and that will happen. But when they lose all these games, it's just what to expect. Don't get your hopes high for competing because you got yourself a veteran in there when you got a garbage roster if you look at the other 52, and then you're making a clear downgrade from quarterback.
How many games do you think Lion fans will be able to handle? Let's say they do get Fields or Wilson, or even put Lance in there. Let's say how long they given the bridge quarterback before they're going to be calling for the rookie?
Well, there's going to be a lot of Lions fans that are going to say start the rookie from day one.
Day one.
Yes. Well, Joe Burrow started from day one. Justin Herbert almost started from day one, and it's not like they're in a situation where the Packers were when they drafted Aaron Rodgers and had a Hall of Famer there. They're talking about can this first-round pick quarterback outdo a journeyman? So I think a lot of Lions fans are not going to have any patience for some are, but there are going to be a lot of Lions fans who say, I don't care about giving the journeyman some reps so that we can be more competitive and cover a spread against the Minnesota Vikings in week 3. Throw the rookie in there, let him go through his lumps, and perhaps by the end of the year, Anthony Lynn can have this quarterback looking like Justin Herbert looked by the end of the year.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes didn't start his first year, so that's all Lion fans need to remember.
They had Alex Smith.
Game 16. Yeah.
Smith is better than Brissett.
Lamar Jackson didn't start.
Who was he behind? Joe Flacco?
Yeah, Super Joe. I think so.
Joe Flacco had accomplished things like leading his team to a Super Bowl, even though that was an aberration. Fitzmagic is good for 3 or 4 good starts a year, and I don't think Lions fans are going to say, "Well, let's see those 3 or 4 good starts. Come on now."
Yeah, Fitzmagic and Winston are the wild cards because they're so entertaining. Now they're not great quarterbacks, but they are very entertaining.
Yes.
You put it well earlier on Fitzmagic. He's good for a 3-4. He's actually 3 or 4 games. He could be right up there as a top 5 quarterback, but then he's going to be bottom 5 at some point. Jameis Winston inside of games looks like a top 5 quarterback and bottom 5 quarterback, so he's a real wild card.
Sounds like Stafford.
Yeah, remember you're a little bit off on your Stafford.
Well, Stafford can be top 5 or bottom 5 throughout the course of a game. He can have a couple of 3 and outs and a pick, and then in the last 2 minutes he can lead the Lions to a touchdown and a field goal.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you today about Matt Stafford. So, since I have that, let's get through some of the feedback. I have the cough.
The Rona?
I don't think so. I don't go anywhere. What am I going to pick it up drinking coffee? This right here is a Christmas present. You know what a French press is? This is a beaut right here, man. You drink coffee, which I do, but I rarely do in the evening, but I have it here. I had it earlier and filled it up, man. This bad boy is the way to go. This is not a commercial. I'm just telling you, I love the product. I don't even know what it's. I just know it's a French press. You like coffee, you like French press. That's the way to go.
I'll take your word for it.
Paul W. Stay away from Carson Wentz. Yeah, the Lions are staying away from Carson Wentz. Like they've got a quarterback they're paying a ton of money to, and they're getting rid of him because they know they can't get it done. They're not going to bring in another guy. They're not bringing in Deshaun Watson. at $40 million a year. They're not bringing in Carson Wentz at 35 or whatever he's getting paid a year. They're not doing that. We can guarantee that Carson Wentz is not going to be with the Detroit Lions. Either is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's going to he's going to veto any trade to Detroit anyway.
Well, just for fun, how crazy would it be if next week or a week after the Super Bowl we find out that Brad Holmes has given up like 2 first-round picks, including the 7 this year, and a second and a third for Deshaun Watson? Like that you want to talk about buzz? Like it would be disappointing because we're so much looking forward to all the quarterback talk over the next couple of months about who they should draft and workouts and all that. But think about how crazy it would be for Lions fans if, with his first major move after selecting the head coach, he mortgages the farm to get Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, do you remember Andre Johnson, the great wide receiver for the Texans there out of Miami?
Yeah.
Was taking 1 pick after Charles Rogers. Remember what he said about the Texans recently, that they're a career killer? They just say, hey, we got Calvin Johnson on line one. Here you go, Deshaun, before you accept that trade. Yeah, that's got 0% chance of happening. I like all the different scenarios, but a 0% chance of happening. All right, more. Paul says, fantasy football next season. Can the Fith chapter host a keeper ESPN league? Please think about it. I'm going to think about it and say yes. I'm going to tell you, NCAA tournament, I'll do a fantasy league for the Fith chapter. So let's. I've got a way to do it already. So
okay,
we'll do that. Let's see. Jelinek loves the idea. Are we sure that Miami is okay with Tua? That's from Brian. No, we're sure that they like him, unless it means putting him in a package with some picks to get Deshaun Watson. Then I think that they are going to like Deshaun Watson. Let's see here. Sweet Lou and Shoeless Joe, it just says from Paul W. I think he's talking about the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I
which,
think he's talking about the 3rd chapter.
We're going to get to that, and let's do that.
All right, yeah, let's turn the page to the 3rd chapter, and that takes us to baseball. Certainly, no, we're not talking about the Tigers, although I did see A.J. Hinch had some comments the other day.
But the big catcher, Ramos, that they signed.
Yeah, they signed 1 year, $2 million. How about that, to compete with the likes of Grayson Greiner and Jake Rogers? He's probably thinking, hey, I don't like the money, but I know I'm going to play ahead of these suckers. But in baseball on Tuesday night, I think it was during our show, the Baseball Writers Association of America voted on who would be inducted into the newest Hall of Fame class. And actually, I put the names of the new individuals on my phone. I'll see if can you see that right there? There's the new class. Nobody was inducted. 75% of the ballots must go to a particular player for him to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. Curt Schilling came the closest, but he only got 71.1% of the ballots, or was on 71.1%. Barry Bonds came in second, 61.8. Roger Clemens, 61.6. Nobody else got even close. And what's interesting about those three is that next year is their 10th and final opportunity to get into the Hall of Fame via the Baseball Writers Association of America vote. For Bonds and Clemens, we know that they have the numbers, but they are accused performance-enhancing drug cheaters. For Schilling, he thinks he's being left out because he's a Republican, as if there are no Republicans already in the Hall of Fame, and there's only a bunch of liberal Democrats in the mainstream media who are voting. But after finding out that he did not make the Hall of Fame earlier this week, he went to social media and asked to have his name taken off of the ballot. Obviously, they're not going to do so. But Dennis, what do you think about nobody getting into the Hall of Fame in 2021, including Curt the Bloody Sock Schilling, Barry Bonds, and Roger Clemens?
Well, if part of getting into the Hall of Fame with the Baseball Writers of America, if it means you have to be a good guy, then nobody's getting in for a long time, because you start looking at it, Bonds and Clemens and Schilling, none of those guys are good guys. That's why Lou Whitaker isn't in the Hall of Fame. Man Ram, Sosa, Rose. I mean, I don't know. None of those guys are getting it either. Maybe Sheffield or Rowland. Like, they're going to have to adjust this, or nobody's getting into the Hall of Fame. They're in a real tough spot here because even if like for the longest time, I said I want to slow play these guys too. Let's see if Barry Bonds' heads explodes, 3 years, after he's out, and let's see, if Clemens, passes away, because of roid rage or something. We didn't really know a lot about performance-enhancing drugs. I wasn't ready to just mint these guys and celebrate their great careers. So I wanted to slow play it, but you change, you evolve over time, and at this point, if I had a ballot, I would have put Bonds and Clemens. I would have put Schilling on there too. I think he's a Hall of Famer. Look at where he ranks in strikeouts. Look at WAR for pitchers, and now he's not a surefire oh man, you got to get that guy in right away. But you start looking on the cusp and the guys that he's around with, and the big games that he was in. Curt Schilling's a Hall of Famer. I would vote for him too. I hope one day that Whitaker gets in. I would even vote for Pete Rose, who I said for the longest time, for 20 years, I said, yeah, I'll put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame the day after he dies. But no, I'm ready to put Rose into the Hall of Fame now too.
Yeah, as a general rule, when it comes to Hall of Fame debates, I don't get all that worked up about it because I think if you're a Hall of Famer, there shouldn't be much debate about it. And if you have to sit there and debate for hours and hours on PTI or First Take or on a show like this or on the radio, then you probably shouldn't be in because it's debatable. The one thing where I am passionate is that if you are a PED cheater, then you should not go in. Obviously, you don't believe that, or perhaps you're of the belief that because there's no proven positive test. Okay.
I used to believe that, but I don't anymore.
I'm standing by that. If you are a PED cheater, then I don't want you in. I think that's a lot different than what Pete Rose did, because what Pete Rose did had no effect on how he played on the field. When you're injecting stuff into your neck or into your booty, and all of a sudden that has ramifications for weeks and months and years afterwards, and when you're talking about the grind of a 162-game season, if you're not getting tired while everybody else is, that's a huge competitive advantage. I think a lot of folks out there can make strong arguments. I would even make the argument that had Clemens and Bonds not taken any performance-enhancing drugs, that they would have had the numbers, the careers, the stats to get in. But because they took that to get an even bigger competitive advantage, I would never, if I had a ballot, put them on. In terms of Curt Schilling, I'm not buying that he is not getting in because he's a Republican or even because he's extreme, because there are lots of Republicans that are in the Hall of Fame. There's a great article that Rob Parker of FS1 wrote yesterday about how I think it was Mariano Rivera is a huge Donald Trump supporter, and he got in unanimously just last year. So it has nothing to do with your political preference.
Schilling's an asshole. Let's just say it.
Well,
that's why he's not getting in.
Yeah, he's extreme. He's a bigot, and he got fired from ESPN because he was sending out, I think it was tweets with racist memes. He also had a white supremacist on his podcast, and I wasn't aware of this until just earlier today. But everybody remembers the U.S. Capitol riot from just 22 days ago. Curt Schilling had some thoughts on that, and you would think that just like everybody else, he would say, hey, disappointed with the results of the election. I voted for Trump, but I don't support the violence. That's not what he tweeted out. Check out this article from the Providence Journal. It starts out kind of funny because it says, former Red Sox star pitcher and failed video game company owner Curt Schilling tweeted out support for the confrontation at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. Quote, you cowards sat on your hands, did nothing while liberal trash looted, rioted, and burned for Air Jordans and big screen, Schilling tweeted in part at 11:52 p.m. on Wednesday. Sit back, shut up, and watch folks start a confrontation for belief that matters, like rights, democracy, and the end of government corruption. Hashtag it's happening. So Curt Schilling tweeted out support once again for the insurrection, for the Capitol riot. Despite that, I don't think that it should be a reason that he doesn't get in the Hall of Fame, because like Pete Rose gambling when he was a manager, not a player, this had tweeting about what he did 22 days ago has nothing to do with what he did as a pitcher 15 years ago. If he wasn't cheating on the field, I don't like racism. I don't like homophobia. I don't like supporting armed insurrections from mobs. But if you think that he has the resume to get in, he should be in. If I was a voter, I would vote for him. But because it's debatable based on what he did in his career, I'm not I'm not upset about it, because that's the way I feel once again about all Hall of Fame votes. When it comes to, if it's debatable, just leave them out.
Yeah, I'm not. So say got my panties in a bunch. Remember, weren't panties. So they're not in a bunch. But the thing about it, like celebrating a bunch of cheaters and boy, that would be a great speech, at the Hall of Fame, having Curt Schilling up there. I really couldn't wait to watch that. Sitting around. I could take a pass on that. So, but that's one thing. The other thing, you keep bringing up Rose. Like I said, I'd put him in there, but he fixed games as a manager. So when you're tainting the game like that, and who's to say
did he fix or did he just bet? Because I remember, I mean, obviously he could be lying, but he said, "Well,
it's the same thing."
Well, it's not the same thing, because
if you listen for a minute, I'll tell you why it's the same thing.
Okay.
But not after you talk. I mean, I'm not like trying to say, if you just listen to me for a minute. I know it sounded like that.
I was just saying that obviously he could be lying, but he said that he always bet on his team to win.
Well, if you do that, and if you bet every single game that your team is playing in, that would be one thing. So if you bet all 162 games, but even if you are betting all 162, if you're not betting the same amount on everyone, it's going to affect how you manage and how you treat the players. And if you're in a tight spot because you lost the night before, and now you're betting 3 or 4 times the amount on this game, maybe you leave the pitcher in a little bit longer. Maybe you're taking your best hitter who you thought should have a rest here, and now you're putting him in here. Maybe you're pinch hitting. It affects every single decision that you're going to make on the field. Pressing guys, pitching rotations, how you're running the team based on how much money that you're betting. That's why you just cannot have anything about it, because it affects everything. You know how baseball's going, and as much as about who you're pulling in and putting out, you got money on it because you're stuck a couple grand and you're putting 10, 20 on it, or you get in a deep hole, and next thing you know, you're talking to your guy and you're saying, "Yeah, I'm pulling everybody out. We'll throw this game," even though you're saying that he bet on everything else. All of a sudden, if he's not betting on it, and you're the bookmaker, you're like, "Let's load up on the Astros going up against the Reds." Rose isn't even betting them.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, Rose is going big on this one. I mean, it affects everything, and so
that's a fair point, and it's not even something I consider. The issue I still have with, which is why I would still put him in, is he did that as a manager, and nobody would suggest that Pete Rose is a Hall of Fame manager. He didn't take a bunch of teams to the World Series or win it, but he was a Hall of Fame player. And if he got into the Hall of Fame, it might on his plaque mention that he was a manager, but he would be getting in as the all-time hits leader as a player.
I'd put him in too.
After he dies, though.
No, I changed that a few years ago. Like, after a while, it was the same thing with steroids. It's like, character matters, that's what I used to say. Character matters. I don't want to root for Barry Bonds. And if I go to Cooperstown, I'll be booing him. I don't want it. And there was a part about it, like with Bonds and Clemens. And even though I don't consider, Hank Aaron died last week. Hank Aaron's my home run king. I don't recognize Barry Bonds as any kind of home run king or single season record holder. In fact, when I was young, I loved the home run chase and home runs. Like, that was like the greatest thing in the world. And if you'd have told me, like, when I was 10, there'll be a guy that takes down Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth and Roger Maris is 61, I would say, this guy's going to be my favorite player ever. But Bonds ruined all that. I don't want to sit around and enshrine. And it's the one thing that the writers can do. They're not taking any of their money away from them. They're not going back, and even though the records, whether you recognize them or not, the only thing they can do is say, "Hey, This is the one thing that we can do because you were a cheater. We're not going to let you get into the Hall of Fame, so stick it. And I was okay with that. But I also wanted to see how it played out with the performance enhancing and all that. And, Bonds looks fine. And, and go ahead, put him in at this point.
He looks fine, like he's healthy, but he was healthier than he should have been while he was playing because he cheated.
I agree.
He put up healthier numbers.
Oh, I know. His head, it looks like a beach ball. And, he was another prick, so, like, I don't care. But, at some point, and the point's been a couple years, like, he's been froze out enough. He's served enough time. Go ahead and put him in. Maybe they should put in all the pricks. He doesn't need to be in. Well, when you start looking at the records and you look at I was talking about looking at Schilling and the strikeouts and Clemens is the greatest right-handed pitcher ever. Like Bonds is the greatest hitter ever. Rose is the greatest thing. Like you should have those guys
because
in the
they
Hall
cheated.
Of Fame and maybe put an asterisk next to it.
Well, in part because they cheated, and their records will stand even if they don't get a Hall of Fame bust in a speech.
Yeah, you know what? I'm ready to put him in.
Okay. Well, what do the people on the feedback say? I would assume they're all behind me.
Well, that would be very presumptuous since that usually is not the case. But let's see. Give the roid users a second room in the hall and have the explanation about that era of baseball.
Yeah. That would like honor them because they get their own special room. Hey, Mom, Dad, can we go to the roid room? I want to hear all about Canseco and Palmeiro and Bonds. Those are my favorite heroes of all time. I want to go to the roid room.
Hey, you know what? The cheaters wing, you say that, but the cheaters wing would be like, back when you could smoke at the bar and everything else, everybody's like, and I don't smoke. But the one thing about it is, you go sit in the no smoking section. Everybody's over there. They're all quiet. You want to go sit over there in the smoking section. Everybody's partying, hammering drinks. I bet if they go to the Baseball Hall of Fame and they got the cheaters wing, that's where all the cool people are going to be hanging out.
Yeah. I would not want a cheater wing.
Maybe that was a little bit of a reach on that analogy.
No, that makes sense.
Paul W. says, call it the blank room and put them in there. Brian Jelinek, guys like Bonds and Clemens should get in. Those guys had skills and were gifted. They should be put in with an asterisk next to their names. I'm with you on that. Put that little asterisk down there at the end. You don't even have to say cheater.
No need for an asterisk. People aren't going to forget what they did. Pete Rose, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame.
Maybe when little Brian Chapman Jr. goes into the Hall of Fame, and you're like, we're not taking you over to the cheater. We're not taking you to the cheaters wing, little BJ. We're not going to do that, Brian Jr. And he's like, Daddy, but look at this guy with the big head. He hit 71 home runs and has more. Why don't you like him? And if it had the asterisk, you can say, oh, there's the asterisk. He was a cheater.
Yes, he's a bad person. That's why you don't take steroids. No, Brian, if there's a Brian Chapman Jr., he's going to play the game the right way.
Yeah. What are you going to tell him about Joe Pa? That's for another story.
I'll tell him the truth.
Okay.
My kids will be able to handle it.
Let's turn the page.
All right, let's turn the page then to the fourth chapter.
This is the most exciting chapter of the evening, folks. We get to the Pistons in the NBA at the quarter pole. The Detroit Pistons, who are in action, they are 4-14, about to be 4-15 tonight. Do you like it? Best and worst part of the Pistons so far at the quarter pole.
Well, who knows? Anthony Davis is not playing in tonight's game, so there's a chance perhaps that the Pistons win this game. But and like the Pistons, the Lakers are playing the second game of a back-to-back, so there's a chance. But I would agree, without having looked at the score, that the Pistons are probably going to lose this game. We are a quarter of the way through the season. They're 4-14, like you mentioned, and Troy Weaver blew up this team in a week, and it was all throughout draft week and the start of the free agency. It was like 21 moves in a span of 5 or 6 days, and it got a lot of buzz from the fan base. And I think a lot of us knew that the team was not going to be good, perhaps even the worst in the league. But, I mean, the results that we have through 18 games is Jeremy Grant being a great free agent signing. He could be an all-star potentially, although being on the second worst team in the East doesn't help his case. And I think he's going to be good for the next couple of years. Josh Jackson and Wayne Ellington have been nice free agent signings as well at shooting guard. The problem is their last 4 first-round picks. Sekou Doumbouya from 2019, and then you got Hayes, Stewart, and Bay from 2020. I know that you have been very adamant that you're not looking for, or you're hoping for, but you're not expecting much improvement, or you're not having any high expectations for Sekou for last year, which is in the past, this year, or next year, which doesn't make sense to me, because if you're in the NBA and you're not contributing for 3 years, you're probably not going to contribute for the next 10 years either. But you look at the 3 rookies that were drafted this year in the first round, Hayes at 7, Stewart at 16, and Bay at 19. I said at the start of the year that best case scenario, one of these rookies is in contention for Rookie of the Year, and maybe you get a couple of guys into the all-rookie team. It's not like you don't have anybody that should compete. You got a number 7 overall pick, a lottery pick, plus 2 others in the top 20. So, I mean, why not at least have some guys in contention? Earlier today, I went to yahoosports.com and looked at their rookie rankings, their NBA rookie player rankings, and just to see where these Pistons would be, because you got 3 of the top 19. One of them's got to be in the top 10, and let's take a look at it. Number 1 is the guy that I wanted, but you were not too high on. The Pistons didn't really have a shot to get him anyway, and that was LaMelo Ball. What about number 2 on these rankings? Story continues. Number 2, Tyrese Halliburton. That's a guy that neither of us were impressed with. That's right. So he was on the board for the Pistons. So far, 11.4 points per game, 4.9 assists per game. I think the Pistons fan base would be pretty excited about that right now over Killian Hayes. Number 3 is a guy the Pistons couldn't have in James Wiseman. Good start to his year for the Warriors. Number 4, Pistons could not have had Anthony Edwards. He was the number 1 overall pick. Number 5, you got Patrick Williams, number 4 overall pick for the Bulls, 9 points per game, 4 boards. Number 6, Tyrese Maxey, a guy that I liked. He plays for the Philadelphia 76ers, 10 points per game so far. Pistons pass up on him not once, not twice, but thrice. Number 7, Cole Anthony at number 15 for the Magic, 11 points per game. Pistons pass up on him. There's 3 spots left in the top 10. Could the Pistons have all 3 of the final 3? No, because Emmanuel Quickley, who was drafted number 25 by the Knicks, is there. Number 9, Peyton Pritchard, drafted 26. Pistons pass up on him 3 times. And number 10, can we get a Killian? Can we get a Bay? Can we get a Stewart? The answer is no. Jayshawn Tate, who went undrafted by the Rockets. So you see all that. You see that Troy Weaver, and we're only a quarter of the way through the season, didn't draft any of the players who were in contention for the Rookie of the Year, and that is a huge disappointment. He had 3 opportunities, and not one is listed as a top 10, at least by Yahoo Sports. Killian Hayes, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, just before he got hurt for several months. He was one of the 5 worst players in the NBA, and you got Bay and Stewart who are just, getting some minutes, but not making a huge impact. Because of the lack of impact by the rookies, the lack of a huge positive impact by these 3 rookies, this has been a more disappointing start than I thought it was going to be.
Well, the one thing, tanking really sucks. And I'm somebody that advocated it for the Pistons this year. So the best part is really the worst part as well, is that they just have 4 wins. They are a really difficult watch. It was like watching the Red Wings last year. Last year, I sat there to watch the Red Wings, and it was so painful watching bad hockey and a bad hockey team that was going to get beat every night. It blows, and it's the same thing with the Pistons here. It's going to be a long process, and saddle up, because this is just the start. They're going to suck next year, and they're going to blow probably the following year. This is the way it's going to be. But the one thing about Killian Hayes, and look, Tyrese Halliburton looks way better, and if you look like you get a star right off the bat, that's the idea. But you know what? He's going to turn 21 next month. Killian Hayes he's 19. He doesn't turn 20 till July. So how much, and these are when the guys develop the most, when they're 18, 19, 20, and 21. Sekou Doumbouya is only 19 years old. So is Isaiah Stewart. And Doumbouya the guy that he compares to the most is Pascal Siakam. Go take a look at he was played 3 years in college, and then the first couple of years, I mean, he didn't hit till he was like 23 or 24. Just go look at his numbers. So I know they've got these guys in the NBA. I would tell you it would be like bringing up, and you're the one that always points it out to me. What if Spencer Torkelson played for the Tigers last year? He'd have been a whiff king. He would have sucked. People would have said, this guy blows. He can't catch up to a fastball.
It's not the same, because when you look at that list that I showed you, you had a whole bunch of other 19-year-olds. LaMelo Ball, 19. Wiseman, one and done. Tyrese Maxey, one and done. Anthony Edwards, one and one that are one and done that are shining. And these
all
Pistons,
of those guys except one though were like those were the exceptions. They were way up. The Pistons didn't have a shot at him.
Well, I get that they didn't have a shot at them, but just because you're 19 years old doesn't mean that you have to wait 3 or 4 years to start making a contribution. And these guys aren't looking like they're so great that they're going to make the All-Star team as a rookie. They just look like really solid contributors. Meanwhile, the Pistons got one of the worst players in the league before he got hurt, and some other guys that are just in there because the Pistons have to throw somebody out there, and Blake Griffin is getting all these days off because he's hurt. So that gives you more time to put Bey and Stewart in there.
Yeah, you're making, I don't know, I say a lot of sense. You're making sense, but the one thing that I would throw in there is that the point guard development, and so what LaMelo's doing is off the charts. Like, he's doing a great job, and I would say Halliburton as well. But you look at, I was watching the Pistons last night, Colin Sexton. He's 22 years old. He was drafted 8 a couple years ago. The young bull. I mean, he's awesome. He looks like an all-star.
Yeah.
He was showing a little bit of flashes. He's 21, but right when he came out, was he looking like he was great? It takes point guards a couple of years. So that's the thing with Hayes. You got to be patient with him. Like, I would like to see Doumbouya looking a lot better, but there was a reason, like the guys that are going to be the superstars that are 18 and 19 or 20 years old, they're getting picked really early. Now, if you could come up with a guy that was 15 and on, that's like a 18 or 19-year-old that's out there, it's showing out, that's a point guard, and then then you're thinking about, wow, man, everybody missed on this. All right, let's look at the feedback here. Pistons are a dumpster fire. First feedback coming in, really disappointing. Let's see. Pistons happen to be down 34-31 at the end of one. Some offense there for them. That's good.
Well, my phone says that they were up.
Here.
Yeah, my phone was saying that they're up 34-31, not down.
Pistons are down. Okay, well, I guess we'll have to. The first error ever.
And now it's 36-35 Pistons. So.
MSU update. They're down 48-28. Sheesh. Woo! Yeah. Well, get to them. We're on the major wager. Maybe that's not a good sign for Michigan, who's coming off a pause on February the 7th. Beth on Facebook. Good to see her chiming in, and she says, "I hope Hayes isn't a bust." Yeah. Well, he's only 19. He's a point guard. They take a while to develop. Go ahead, Brian, tell Beth what you think about Killian Hayes and the possibility of him being a bust.
Here's what I would say. Don't take the possibility of drafting Jalen Suggs off the board. He's the top point guard in the draft. He's out of Gonzaga. Based on the way Killian Hayes played and based on the fact that he's not going to be back until March, if the best player available for the Pistons at wherever they're drafting is Jalen Suggs, maybe it's because that Suggs has proven to be the best player. Maybe it's because they're sitting at number 3 and Cade Cunningham and somebody else have already been drafted. You take Jalen Suggs because he's proven that he can play basketball in this country at a high level, as opposed to Killian Hayes, who's putting up bricks, who's turning the ball over and everything else. Pistons need a backup point guard, so Killian could be that. But if Jalen Suggs is the guy, then you don't pass him up.
Well, yeah, there's no sacred cows, and Killian Hayes certainly isn't in that category right now, even though they selected him. All right, we've been talking gambling all show here. They're hitting around about some plays and all of this. Let's get to the major wager in the 5th chapter.
Yes, let's do so. And as we turn the page to the 5th chapter, just want to put up this notification for you guys. You've seen it throughout the show, and if you're just joining us, here it is once again. And we know that sports betting in the state of Michigan is now legal, and there are a lot of different sports betting apps that you can go after that give you some benefits, but some of them only give you deposit benefits. Check out this one right there from DraftKings. If you look at that link right there, you type that link in, sportsbook.draftkings.com/r/sb/brs of ctb/us.i/in-sb. It's easier to just type it down and pause the video and type it down. But if you do that and then you register on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, depending on how much you deposit, you can get free gambling money. If you deposit $25, then you can get an additional $25 in gambling money. You deposit $50, you get an extra $50 in gambling money. And if you deposit $100, you can get an extra $100 in free gambling money. So something to consider for all those out there that maybe have not tried sports betting yet, or have tried but are looking at additional sports books to get some freebies. So Dennis, remind us what you picked on Tuesday and what you're looking for tonight or throughout the weekend.
On Tuesday, I got down early on the Chiefs -3.5 in the Super Bowl, and I also threw a one-game fantasy out there with Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, Butker as my kicker, and Gronk. And for tonight, I looked at Michigan State being on pause for 20 days and just getting back to practice on Monday. And I thought, you know what? They're going to have dead legs. And now I know that Villanova was on pause. They came back and they're 2-0. But Clemson, they were on pause. They came back and lost their first 3 games. Penn State, your boys, watching them the other night, the whole broadcast, they had heavy legs. It was really tough getting back and getting acclimated. So I looked at tonight's Michigan State game with being down a couple players, being down a coach, and just getting back to practice on Monday after that long pause. I thought, I'm going to look and see what that halftime line is, and if it's anything under 4, I'm jumping all over the Scarlet Knights. It was just 1, so I went heavy on Rutgers -1, and the halftime line, the Spartans were down 6, so I won that one.
Hey, that's a smart bet. You winning money, that's a smart bet. So hopefully other people took that bet as well. You should have tweeted that out so everyone would know. Maybe you should do that next time.
Sometimes you just think you got a feeling, or you like this, or this one had a little bit of, a little bit behind it, or you're thinking about, and that's always the best way to bet. Not betting every day. I want some action. That's what my dad used to say. Like, why are you betting the blue and gray game here on Christmas and going heavy? I want some action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason that people do sports betting, is because it's fun. But I think that you should tweet out your picks just in case other people want to get money thanks to Dennis's picks. It's a way to spread the wealth. And
I usually, you bet games that are going on during the day. Normally, I take games that haven't occurred, but the Michigan State one jumped out to me so much. Yeah. I sent, people are like, yeah, really easy.
He did send me that text.
Yeah, I sent it to chat.
Yeah, so I know. On Tuesday, I took Akron -11 against Eastern Michigan because your alma mater is just such an awful basketball program. And I made easy money on that one because Akron won by 21 points. So that was a great pick. Tonight I'm going with college basketball again. Haven't seen either of these teams play. Weber State is traveling to Idaho to play the Vandals. And this game has not tipped off yet. It tips off at 9, so about 10 minutes to get your bet in if you like this. Idaho is an 11.5-point underdog at home. Why do I like Weber State to win and cover? Weber State is 7-4. Idaho 0-11. 0-11 on the season.
Not good.
No, it's not good. Weber State also has covered in 71.4% of the games, while Idaho has covered in just 27.3% of the games. Once again, the game doesn't start until 9. I put a major wager on Weber State.
Yeah, next year I really have to think about, some of my principles and my core values when it comes down to gambling. I used to just take Saturday and I do a lot of fantasy, but I do that all with the pros. I've never bet on college football or college basketball, but I have played pools, like an NCAA pool. So I have gambled, but for the most part, like I'd say, I'd never bet against Michigan. Like, why would I want to bet against Michigan? That's my team. And I used to say that. Why would I want to bet against the Pistons or the Wings or the Lions or any of my other teams? And yet, over the years in fantasy football, I've taken players of mine and put them against because I knew the Lions' defense sucked.
Well, there
I've
you
done
go.
it in daily fantasy, so I have done that. I just actually haven't gone against them, in a straight up bet. But if there's money to be made out there, and
especially now, like the Pistons are in contention for the worst record in the NBA. The Red Wings just had the worst season of any team in the 4 major sports. The Tigers are terrible, and the Lions are awful.
But I don't want to make it a habit of like, oh, it's meant to. I'm always rooting for. Here's the thing.
Give yourself a little bit of joy in these tough times.
But here's the part about the tough times. Like, from 2006 to 2015, it was a lot of fun being a Tigers fan, packed ballpark and everything else. But since then, it sucked. Am I really gonna?
If they're winning, you bet on them to win.
Rooting against the Tigers. So right now, here's the thing: rooting against the Tigers, rooting against the Pistons, I'm rooting against the Wings. And next year, we're expecting the Lions to be 2-14. Wow, man, I really feel good being a Detroit sports fan.
Well, it sucks because the teams suck. But if at the very least you can make some money off of it, you won't feel as down. Yeah, and you don't have to bet on.
I need to adjust that mind. Like, you got to get your mind right.
Like you can't change how bad they are on the court, the field, or the ice, but you can change whether or not you can benefit from that. Because if you don't bet on it, then you're just gonna feel down in the dumps and say this is awful. But if at least you can say, hey, Wings got trucked by the Dallas Stars tonight 5-2, but I got $20. Oh, then you can take your kids to get a Happy Meal.
Here's the best thing for you tonight, Brian. Beth on Facebook said, "Good point, Brian." There you go.
Mm-hmm.
See it right there. Nice
I
job.
appreciate that.
I told her it was the first good point you made tonight, but that wasn't really true. I was just joking around with you. All right, chap. Great job. Also, great job by Brian Jelinek. We'll hear from him more coming up on Tuesday. He might even make an appearance on the show late. We'll see how that goes. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you're just tuning in now and it's live, you say what's going on, you can use Facebook, you can use Twitch, you can use the live chat on YouTube or read it throughout the show. Have a lot of fun. We got a podcast that goes up in about an hour or two. I've got that on my podcast page, and it pops up, and then you can listen to it. And so, that's the way to go. That's podcast. Over an hour of quality content there. So take advantage of all of those, and the ratings. What else? You want to leave comments? That's a bonus as well when it comes down to the podcast. All right, for Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. Thanks for watching episode 74. We will talk with you on Tuesday. It'll be Super Bowl week.
But people can't wait. He represents the mid. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth chapter.